So after playing for almost 60 hours and completing 100% of everything available to do on the map in Forspoken, it is finally time for tips and tricks I wish I knew earlier. Very quickly, before we start, huge thanks to Square Enix for providing a copy of the game so that we can get this content out for you guys as soon as possible. So without wasting any more time, let's jump right into it. The first useful tip we're going to be showing you guys is related to the touchpad on your PlayStation 5 controller. And what I'm talking about specifically is that you can swipe in each direction on the touchpad and go to whichever skill tree you want to use. So by swiping left on the touchpad, you automatically go to the red magic. By swiping right, you go to Freya's purple magic. By swiping down, you go to the blue magic. And by swiping up, you go to the green magic. Once you get used to switching magic trees this way, you're never going to go back to using the D-pad again. As the D-pad, you have to scroll through one at a time and you can't go directly to the one you want. Given you can hold down L1 and R1 and select whichever skill tree you want off of the wheel, but in the middle of combat, it's just way more practical to use the touchpad. There are a couple of options in the settings menu I would definitely recommend checking out. The first and most important one is going to be the support spell auto switch. This is one of those things that I think should just really start enabled, but for whatever reason it doesn't. And what this does is that when you press L2 to use a support magic spell, it will actually automatically switch and get another one ready, whichever one isn't in cooldown. This way you don't have to manually switch between your support spells every time you use one and change it to another one that's ready to use. This will automatically scroll through all of them until you have all of them on cooldown in that same colored tree. And if you're just starting out, support spells may seem like that, just support spells, but the more you get into the game, the more you'll realize your support spells are actually where all of your damage is going to come from, really. And they are going to be the essential sort of powerful spells you're going to be using the most. So being able to spam through these as quickly as possible is going to be definitely really essential, especially if you're playing on a harder difficulty. Related to what we mentioned before, there are going to be times when you want to switch through spells manually. Let's say if you've got a debuff and you want to switch to a spell to get rid of that, you might want to actually hold down the L1 or even the R1 button to switch your main attack. In these cases, the game will slow down while you have the selection wheel open. But there's actually an option here to fully pause the game while you hold these buttons down while you're selecting whatever spell you want to use. It's not that important, but just know that option is there if you want to use it. The next one might be a little bit controversial depending on how much of a purist you are in these games, but it's going to be the auto-open chests. And just for some context, there are going to be these big, larger, locked chests throughout the world, which are always going to contain old coins, which are going to be used for stuff. We'll explain it a little bit later on. However, there are a lot of these, and each one requires a short sort of connection puzzle to unlock them, which are quite quick, and usually you can solve them in just a couple of moves if you do them right. So this option allows you to auto-open them without solving any puzzles each time, which I know what you're thinking, and believe me, I'm one of the people who thought, there's no way I'm activating this, as it just seems like a bit of a cheat, and I do really enjoy, making the most out of the games. However, after opening like 50 of these, as there's just so many in the world, and there's so much other things to do, I did end up activating this, as they just become a little bit tedious after a while. So just again, know that option's there. If you don't want to use it, that's fine. Also, if you don't want to feel so cheap, let's call it, you can actually also spend mana to open these chests and lock doors instead of actually solving the puzzle. So that's a bit more clean, I suppose. Okay, so next, let's talk about a couple of things you want to be doing in early game to get the best start possible. Related to the old coins we've just been talking about that you can get out of these locked chests, once you have 6 of them very early on in the game, you can come here to the bookshop in Sepau, and you can buy a thing called the Ballast of Boiling Blood. This is going to be a passive you can put on any of your gear. This means necklaces or cloaks, and it will increase the critical hit damage, which is definitely one of the best skills you're going to be able to equip very early on in the game. Make sure when you visit Sepau, you go by the Finders Keepers pit here, as there's always going to be a few free items and materials for you to pick up, which always come in handy. Now, while playing through the story, if you're anything like me, I enjoyed actually playing through most of the story first, and then coming back and exploring and grabbing all the stuff and getting the 100% of the map. So even if you are really just focusing on the story to begin with, make sure you at least unlocking the refuge houses and the belfry towers, as these are going to be fast travel locations you can come back to later on at any point, which will make your exploration later on be a lot more pleasant when you can just go back to anywhere you've already been, at least in the general area. Speaking of fast travel, while you're on the map, you can actually just press L3 to go to a list version of the fast travel locations you've unlocked, instead of having to scroll over and find them on the map, which especially when you're going back to Sepau, most of the time, this is really quick because it's always at the top of the list. If you've been playing for a while, you probably already realized this, but don't bother grinding enemies to level up on this game. It is really not worth it. As just completing the quest, their exploration and all this is going to give you so much more experience points than it's going to be worth doing, like just killing random groups of enemies. They really don't give you any experience at all, practically. Though this definitely doesn't mean avoid every enemy on the game. It just means that if it's an enemy group like out of your way, don't feel the need to go and attack every single one of them, as it's just going to be a bit of a time waste, especially the more and more you advance through in the story. Also remember, when you unlock cloaks and new necklaces, you don't just unlock that cloak or that necklace, you also unlock the possibility of using their abilities, their passives, on any other piece of equipment you already own. So even if you've already upgraded one piece of gear, or you just really like the way it looks, it's still definitely worth checking out those locations and getting more cloaks and getting more necklaces, just to have a more varied choice of what skills to put on it. I would definitely recommend unlocking the soar spell as soon as you possibly can, as this will allow you to climb higher up the walls, and it really opens up the exploration so much more, as there is a lot of places you can't reach if you don't have this ability. I'm not talking about the fountain you jump in pretty much at the start of the game to get an extra jump on the wall. This later on in the second region, there's going to be another fountain that you can see right here where I'm showing you on the map. Now, soar will give you one extra jump on climbing up walls. So like I said, this really opens up the exploration, and there's going to be so many more places you can get to. So definitely grab this as soon as you can. Full damage in this game is pretty lenient, as in you don't really die or take much damage at all really from full damage. However, you will lose your stamina, cuff shields, whatever you want to call it, the diamonds, and it kind of really slows down the pace and everything. If you want to avoid that, you can actually just attack just before hitting the ground at any moment, or pretty much do any action, and it will reset the full count, so you can just land on the ground without any problem whatsoever. From Chapter 4 onwards, you unlock the Spellcraft mechanic, which allows you to do challenges to upgrade each of your individual spells. The upgraded spells usually makes them either more powerful, more efficient, cost less stamina, etc., depending on the spell. So obviously first you're going to be focusing on the spells used the most. However, there's something else very important about these challenges, that no matter which one you do, they'll all give you +1 in the magic of that color, which means all of the red magics will give you a +1 bonus in red magic. So make sure you keep on doing these challenges, even for the spells you think you're never going to use, as the passive of +1 in that magic tree is going to be pretty insane once they all stack up. Now we're on the topic, I would also recommend upgrading all of your skill trees quite variedly, not just focus too much on one, as if you're playing on harder difficulties, you probably already noticed this, that each enemy is weak or resistant to each type of magic. You can check this by scanning the enemies by pressing up on the D-pad twice. So it's always good to have a decent amount of spells in each of your spell trees, just to make sure you're ready for all situations. So before, we mentioned a little bit about these old coins that you get from all of the locked chests throughout the game. And one of the main things you can do with this is there's going to be a secret shop right here in the third region that I'm showing you on the map. And inside this secret shop, they sell some pretty cool items that all need a decent amount of these old coins, especially the sewing kit that costs 64 old coins. So you can see why I turned on that auto open chest option we talked about earlier. And by purchasing this sewing kit, you can actually craft a unique necklace and a unique cloak that looks pretty sick. It's actually the ones I'm wearing in this video right now. So a few things for late game. In case you're wondering, the absolute best nail designs are the Spectrum and the Savage. The Spectrum nail design increases your critical hit rate based on the number of total spells you've learned, and gives you +2 in all spell damage. So obviously in late game, you're going to have learned pretty much every spell and every skill tree. You're going to be hitting a bunch of criticals pretty much all of the time. The Spectrum is given to you by defeating the water post-game sort of super boss, which can be found right here on the map where we're showing you. Then the Savage nail design does pretty similar, except instead of crit rate, it's going to be damage boosted based on the number of total spells learned, as well as all spell damage +2% also. Can be found also very late game here in the top left corner of the map. By wearing the two of these combined in late game when you've unlocked all spells is definitely the best option pretty much for most situations. The next one I've left here until the end of the video, as I know many people aren't really interested in trophy hunting these days. But if you are interested in trying to get the platinum trophy, there is a slight problem, as one of the trophies is upgrading each and every one of the spells with the spellcraft sort of challenges we mentioned before. And specifically the Tempest level 2, this is the ultimate like R2, L2 attack with the green skill tree, is got a little bit of a bug. And you can actually get it, however the description is badly translated from the Japanese version. It says that you need to defeat the final enemy in a battle with that skill, which we've done in other challenges and it's been no problem. However, this one, if you try to do it, you may have realized it doesn't work whatsoever. And the reason for that is because the Japanese version actually says that you need to defeat the final enemy in a battle while in a pinch. Now, unfortunately, when it says in a pinch, it's not really clearly defined what that means. I would have thought it just meant that low health or have no shields. I've tried it with no potions. I've tried it in pretty much all situations and I've still not been able to quite figure out. But hopefully with that translation, it's a bit more useful than just the in-game version. This is kind of annoying as it is pretty much one of the only things standing between me and the platinum trophy, which I was really hoping to get before getting this video out. But I still haven't really got this challenge done yet. But anyway, let's not drag out this video any further. I hope you did find these tips useful, guys. If you have been playing for a while and you have any extra tips I haven't shared in this video, definitely leave them in the comments down below, and we'll see you next time.